Hey guys, this is Ashley White, the owner of the Polka Dot Alley, and I'm so excited to introduce you to the Alley podcast. Hey guys, all right, this is an episode that we knew would eventually come. We didn't know when we would do it. I kind of just want to wait till I'm ready, and I think it's time. We're back in the house, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about the fire. If you are new to PDA in the last 2 years, you may not realize what happened to our family, but just over 2 years ago, on April 28th, 2023, our house burned down. And I know that can mean different things. Our house fully burned down. We had people after saying, oh no, kind of thinking maybe one area or the garage. It was actually everything. So in this episode, I think it's going to end up being a two-parter because I have a lot to say about our community rallying behind me and what that meant for me. I want to read some things to you that were given to me by some of our amazing customers and now friends. But I also really want to spend the first part talking about the fire, what that meant to me, what that meant to our family. Some of the things that I think would be great to know if you are in the unfortunate circumstance ever to know someone or have someone close to you in the same situation, and maybe things to say and things not to say, and just some of the kind of things that went along with it with us. So in this part, we'll focus on maybe the bad part, but then we'll wrap it up in the next episode with all of the positives that came from it. And there were plenty. So thinking back to when the fire happened, and let me also preface this by saying I'm a really positive person. I am really thankful to not suffer from anxiety or depression or any of those things that I can't imagine how they feel. I know they're real, but I'm pretty positive. I'm a business owner. You kind of have to be to keep it going at 18 years long. And I don't like to think about things that make me sad. So in the last 2 years since the fire happened, I really don't think about it a lot. I push it away as much as I can. When things come up, of course, I have no choice but to remember it. But I try not to remember it with tears or sadness, which is, of course, with time become a lot easier. Early on, it was still very emotional, and I still would just get really upset and kind of not want to think about it or talk about it. And it has gotten easier now that we've hit that 2-year mark, especially being that we are back in our house, as you can see. So looking back to when it first happened, April 28th, my sister Katie and I, it was very random. We had never done this before, and we had decided to go on a trip. She has 4 little kids, and one, actually today, 18-year-old, as a lot of you know. And it's chaotic. It's a lot. At this point, 2 years ago, she was not working for me full-time because she had all the little kiddos. We thought, gosh, it'd be really fun to take a sister trip. We've never done that, just the two of us. Let's go somewhere. We can make it a work trip and do a live. And we knew we wanted Florida. We picked Clearwater. No offense to our loving mother, but it was just close enough that she could come and visit us, but just far enough that we were at a hotel and we got to feel like we were on vacay. So we went to Clearwater. We were so excited. We were there for one night and did our live. I believe it was a Thursday night. We did our live. It was great. We were having fun. The next morning, had breakfast. It was rainy. We sat by the pool. I'll never forget. I had just gotten it. That's funny too, when you have any kind of trauma or grief, the things you can specifically remember. If you ask me right now, in any other circumstance, when I got my hair colored or when I did this, I would have no idea. But I do remember that I had just had my eyebrows microbladed for the first time. And so I was having to put Aquaphor on them the whole time. We were out by the pool at the hotel because the beach was closed. It was so windy and stormy. We were like, oh man. And so that was Friday. We had done our live the night before. We got the work out of the way. And now we were on to the fun part of the weekend. So we were going to go to dinner that night. We were at the pool knowing the next day the weather would be better and we would go to the beach. And we went to dinner. We ordered all of our food and we were sitting there at the restaurant and I got a phone call. And the phone call was from my best friend and neighbor, Sarah's husband, Chad, who's also a good friend of mine and has been since junior high. So I answered, and he's a funny guy, by the way, like he's a jokester. I answer the phone and he immediately tells me that there's a car in my garage on fire. I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't know why I would think that would be a joke, but in that moment, you're just thinking, no way. Number one, I actually had just talked to James, and I knew that my car was at the airport, and I knew that he was at baseball with the kids. So in my mind, there is no car in our garage. What I didn't know is that a neighbor had asked if her sibling could park a car in our garage before a hailstorm that was supposed to be coming, which sadly never even came. But there was supposed to be a storm, and because they had a golf cart and cars in their garage, that car wouldn't fit in there. They knew I was gone, so they asked him if that car could be parked here. So he had said, yes, here's the garage code, go ahead. I didn't know all of that. So I immediately was like, there isn't a car in my garage. You're messing with me. And he's like, no, I'm serious. Well, while I'm talking to him, I get a call on the other line, and it was our local area code, and I didn't know the number, and obviously due to what he was saying, I answered it, and it was the fire department. Then I knew it was real. At that point, I still fully thought it's going to be minor. Like, they'll get it out, surely. Like, this is good news. He had already called 911. This is the fire department. They're going to get here and put it out. And worst case scenario, the garage is lost, which sucks because I immediately am thinking of which I think a lot of us do this, do not do this. The garage is the worst place to keep your prized possessions, your kids' letters, your old pictures, and I think a lot of us do that. Our ornaments, we keep everything in bins in our garage. The garage is pretty much, of course, now I know way too many things about fires and hazards 2 years later, but that's the last place you want to be storing the things that matter most to you. We could go into that another time. So I immediately am thinking, oh my gosh, this stinks, but they'll get it out. No part of me had any concept of what was to come. So I'm talking to them. They say, they're on the way, so on and so forth. I immediately hang up. I call James. He already knows. I don't even remember now, honestly, if Chad called him or another neighbor, but he already knows. He threw the kids back in the truck, and they're racing back home at this point. And I didn't know what to do. I'm sitting at dinner across from Katie. Part of me is like, well, maybe this will be nothing. It's just going to be like a corner of the garage. But I'm like, we should probably go. Our food had just got to the table, but I'm kind of getting upset. I'm confused. I've got 1,000 neighbors calling. I don't know what to think. My kids, I can hear them sobbing in the back of the truck with James. So we leave and we go sit outside on a bench. And I remember I went live in the VIP group. I was like, please pray, anyone that can, pray that we don't lose our house, pray that they get this fire out, that the dogs are out, all of those things. And it was very fresh, very raw. I still remember doing that. I don't fully remember everything I said, but I remember saying at some point, it'll just be the garage, And we immediately just walked back over to our hotel, got into the hotel, and I remember just thinking, I don't know what to do. Like, obviously I need to go home, but what do I need to do? So at this point, I think by the time we got to the hotel, we had found out that it was going to be a lot more than what I thought it was. Sarah FaceTimed me. I watched the FaceTime for a few minutes, and then I remember hanging up on her. I couldn't see it. I couldn't watch. And, in some ways, I'm so thankful that I wasn't here because I cannot fathom what it was like for James to sit there and watch this happen, and our friends and our neighbors. The kids were pretty quickly moved into neighbors' houses with their kids so that they weren't just sitting watching the whole thing. But I do wish I had been here to be here for them, obviously. A lot of times, of course, you have the what ifs. And I'm always like, what if I hadn't gone on that trip? My car would have been in the garage. They wouldn't have asked us to put the car in our garage because I would have been in town. None of this would have ever happened if I hadn't gone on that trip. And you can make yourself crazy all day doing things like that because then James has the guilt of, why did I say yes? Why did I tell them they could park the car in the garage? And we both have had those moments, I know, so many times where I feel like it's my fault for leaving and then my car wasn't here. And he feels like it's his fault for telling them yes. And at the end of the day, what's going to happen is going to happen. It is what it is. We can't control it. There's nothing we can control. And in looking back, we can't regret it. We can't regret what we did. Obviously, he had no way of knowing that that car had a recall on it, that had not been taken care of, and it's a long story, but it has some kind of fluid that drips onto a breaker or a circuit or something, I don't even know, and it's not supposed to be parked in a garage. That's another thing I really would like to just point out to everybody. Take those seriously. If you get a warning, if you get a recall of some nature, take it seriously. Within 20 minutes of that car being put in my garage, that happened. Obviously, I am glad that it didn't happen at the neighbor's house, who was the sibling, because they were all home and we weren't home. And so who can imagine what would have happened if that had happened there and they were all home? So do I think those people had any idea that this was going to happen? Of course not. You can get a recall and never think anything of it, maybe never even fully read it, never expect that anything will happen, but it can. And fun fact, the manufacturers of the cars, if they send those out, they did their part. If you don't take it in and they have proof that they sent it and you didn't, they wash their hands. We won't go too far into that though, because that stuff's all still ongoing. But I don't regret going on the trip now. He doesn't regret just being a nice person and saying sure, because we couldn't have known. And we can always play the domino game of, if I would have done this, would this have happened, and vice versa. But that's life. And the longer you sit and focus on the things that you wish you would have done different, you're living in the past and you're not just moving forward. And we need to move forward. So we really try to not focus on that. But that's how it happened. I know a lot of people wonder, a lot of people are curious. And at the end of the day, it was just a really bad accident. It was a very unfortunate, completely insane, 1 in a million situation that happened to us, that could happen to anybody, honestly. So at this point, I had seen the FaceTime, I had hung up, we kind of realized it was getting bad. I don't know why, when James was there, the fire department called me again, but they did. And I remember him saying, I'm the fire chief. He wanted to apologize, and he told me that they were going to have to let it burn to ash. And I remember just sobbing and saying, why? What do you mean? You're there. And where we live, we're kind of in a weird spot because technically we live in Fort Worth. So I know a lot of people are like, well, that's a big city. What do you mean? But we live on the outskirts of Fort Worth. So we actually are not in city limits, and there are not fire hydrants in this neighborhood. That was not something we knew moving in. And I know a lot of people are probably thinking we are wild and crazy for rebuilding here. But it truly was such a fluke thing. And at this point, if that happens to me again here, I'm just going to take it that I'm meant to live in a cute little shack on a beach and I'm out of here. So hopefully it doesn't. But it was a situation where they ran out of water, honestly. The wind was so strong that night that it was blowing from the garage towards the house. So pretty quickly, it actually left the garage and traveled through the upstairs and the attic, which then, of course, made it go through the rest of the house. We had, I think, volunteer firefighters, Fort Worth firefighters, all the different little surrounding cities. Firefighters were called from all over, and they all came and did what they could with their trucks, but they didn't have fire hydrants to plug into. So that was a situation where they ran out of water. So they had to let the house burn fully onto itself. The dogs had already gotten out at this point. Neighbors came and I think maybe even crawled in the dog door, got into our gate and gotten the dogs out. So we already knew the dogs were out. We knew there was nothing else we could do at this point. James sat outside and just watched as it fully burned to the ground. At some point, he got Katie and I a flight back home. She packed all of my bags. I remember sitting in the bed and immediately thinking, what do my kids need right now? Like, I'm not going to get emotional. I almost did. Like, I can talk about the house. I can talk about my things, but I talk about the kids. That part's hard. So I remember thinking, like, what do they need right now? And I immediately was online ordering their sound machines that I knew they needed to sleep with. I was thinking of their blankies, which that part is still, honest to God, when I think of every single thing that we lost, and it was a lot, the saddest and hardest thing were their blankies and stuffed animals. To this day, and I swear and stand by this, if I could go back in time and have saved anything, like over everything I had in that house, it would have been their loveys and their blankie. That was the most traumatizing part. They cried themselves to sleep for a while over their loveys and their blankies. And that's something you just can't replace. I immediately tried to find as many replicas as I could, but it's not the same. Literally this morning, this is odd timing, Hayes loves to look at Time Hop in the morning before school. He snuggles with me and before he eats breakfast, and he always wants me to open Time Hop. And Time Hop today was just a memory of a picture of James and the kids getting ready for bed one night. We were on Hayes' floor, and he snuggled them up for a picture from, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago today. And he was holding Lili, his little stuffed lion. And he immediately this morning got upset and said, "Oh my goodness, Lili." He has 3 other variations of Lili upstairs, but it's not the same. And same with Ellison and her Vegas. She had had her little dog since birth, and she was 11 when this happened. She had carried that thing everywhere. So that was the really hard part. I tried to order what I could to get back what they needed, but you can't replace everything. And that was one of the biggest things we couldn't replace. So I ordered what I could. I ordered, underwear, and I ordered toothbrushes and just all the things that you're thinking, okay, wait, I have nothing. We have nothing. Like, what do we need? And so I spent probably an hour doing that just because I was so numb, and I was like, I need to be doing something, and I'm not there. I'm not with my kids. Like, I have to do something. James and the kids later that evening, his parents and brother and wife all came here during the fire, and he ended up going back and taking the kids to spend the night with his family that night. The next morning when we came back, we immediately came home from the airport to the house, and I will never forget the feeling of pulling up and the house being gone. It's the most surreal feeling. Think about every time you leave your house. Every time you leave your house to go run an errand or to go to work or to go do whatever, just imagine, what if that house was gone when you came home? You wonder, did I leave those shoes sitting in that one spot on the floor? What did I have? Just so many things go through your head. So the way my neighborhood works, you kind of hit a stop sign, and then as you're turning the corner, you see the house. And I remember just seeing smoke. This was the next day. And honestly, for weeks after, we still had smoke kind of settling and rising on the ground because the fire had burned so hot. It took so long for it to fully go out. So I pulled up, and I was completely in shock. Knowing and seeing are 2 very different feelings. And I just remember looking at it and just not even really knowing what to do. I remember Katie crying, and at that point, James and the kids were there to meet me. I remember, of course, them sobbing. I'm sobbing. We're all hugging, just looking at it. And there were people that were here. My sister Susan was waiting. My best friend from college, April, was waiting. I had people who had come that I didn't know were coming that were just waiting for me to get here and hug me. And we all just stood out there looking at it. And of course, I immediately was like, I'm going to go dig in there and find things. But we couldn't because it was so hot. And that's something, too, that I think people don't understand. There's so many things that people think, why can't you just do this? Or why didn't you do this? Or whatever the question may be. And there's a lot of different reasons. So in that moment, we weren't able to come into the house area because everything was still burning. It was still really hot. And so we had to kind of keep our distance and stay away. I have pictures of me in video even, I think, that friends and neighbors took standing in front, and you can just see little bits of smoke kind of all around the base of the house. We had only lived in this house when that happened for 16 months. We moved in after building and waiting for about 2 years for our dream house. We moved in mid-December of 2021, and the fire was the end of April 2023. So what's crazy is we were in here 16 months, and then we were out of here for over 16 months rebuilding this house. That was pretty weird, knowing that we lived in our rental home about as long as we had lived in this home. So that day, we saw everything. I remember after being out there with everybody for a few minutes, I just didn't want to be around everyone anymore. That's another thing about me. I'm not a super publicly emotional person, and it was a lot. I was getting a lot of hugs. I'm also not a big hugger. I was getting a lot of hugs. I was looking at everything I own being gone, and I was seeing my kids devastated. I was in such a state of how am I going to work? my whole job is smiling and being funny and being relatable on a live. How I can do that? How am I going to replace everything I own? Like, can we live here again? I had no idea. There were so many unknowns, and I like being able to control a situation, and I couldn't. And so I remember just feeling really, really lost. And I went to Sarah's house 2 doors down, and I went into her guest room, and I just laid down and went to sleep. I remember just getting under the covers and just like hiding and going to sleep that Saturday morning. And after a while, I got up. It was time to face reality. We drove the kids back to James's parents' house. And I still, to this day, remember being in the front seat of the truck with my feet on the dashboard, and I'm on my phone ordering things. I'm like ordering my bar stools, which you see right there. Those were ordered 2 days, a day after the fire. And he's sitting next to me saying, Ashley, what are you doing? We don't even have a house. We don't need those bar stools yet. And I was like, I want my bar stools back. I want the same bar stools. And that was just my way of handling it. I needed to be busy. I needed to make sure I could get the same things back. I didn't want something new. This is the exact couch I had before the fire. This is the exact cabinet. Those are the exact bar stools. Anything that I could get the same, I wanted the same. Not even as much for me, but for the kids. I wanted it to be home again. I wanted it to be what it was before. And we could almost pretend like it never happened, which is impossible, but that's all you can try to do. So that's what I did. That's what I focused on. I remember getting there and dropping the kids off, and we went to an outlet mall to get socks and undies and shoes for the kids. They only had what they were wearing that day. They had nothing else, no possessions. I was in Clearwater, so I did have a little bag of jewelry and some clothes with me. It was all weekend beachwear, but I at least had some flip-flops, and I had some, things like that with me. James and the kids only had whatever they were wearing. And one thing that is funny is when we think back on the things that we had that matter. I have a ring from my dad, and it was with me. And I'm like, thank God it was with me. James, one of the only things that he really kept and had from his childhood was his baseball glove. They were at practice, and he had brought his glove with him to play catch with the boys. So he still has his glove. So it's kind of cool when you look back and think, we don't have everything. Oh, I'm going to cry. We don't have everything, but we at least got something, we at least each had something. The kids didn't. But the thing that I try to tell myself and remind myself is that they're so young. And so they will remember it happening, but I'm hoping they won't remember the way that they felt. And they will have so many more years and lifetimes to have more prized possessions and things to keep and remember, that it won't forever haunt them. That's what I hope. And I think they're doing really, really well 2 years later, being back home. So that's kind of what we spent the first weekend doing, trying to get the things we needed, trying to just think, what are we going to do? And I remember not long after, we had the conversation of, are we going to rebuild in the same spot? Do we want to just tear it down, sell the lot, and go somewhere else? But guys, we had just moved PDA here and gotten settled. We had just gotten the warehouse, and, we had staff there, and we absolutely love our neighbors. They rallied behind us so much, it was crazy. Our builder rallied behind us. They immediately called me the night of the fire while I was still in Clearwater and said, we have a model home in the same neighborhood. We are happy to have you guys go stay there. It's furnished. You can go tonight. So they were willing, shout out to Kudo Homes based in Granbury, Texas. They were willing to lose their model home, which they did for a year and a half, to let us go live in it. We were able to stay in the neighborhood. The kids were able to stay on their bus. We were able to see all of their friends. It was one of the biggest blessings that came out of the fire, bar none. So they called that night. So we pretty much already knew right off the bat, we have somewhere to stay. We're still going to be in the neighborhood. They let us stay for free, I want to say for like 2 months, and then we paid rent. But my gosh, guys, it was amazing. It was the best case scenario. Each kid had their own room. It was more than what we ever expected to have happen. So those first few days, we felt like, okay, we already had a few things figured out. And at the end of the day, when it came to, are we idiots for rebuilding in a place where we know technically this could happen again, it boiled down to just having to have faith. We just have to have faith that it won't happen again. we couldn't have controlled. If we built somewhere else, that something different wouldn't have happened. So we just have to trust and hope and pray that that was a one and done kind of situation. So we decided to rebuild here. It was an absolute nightmare, I will not lie. Things with the insurance don't go as easily as one would hope. There was a lot that went into it, and it took a long time. There were many, many tears. Silly things like I wasn't able to get the same light fixtures for above the island, and it crushed me. I know realistically it didn't have anything to do with the lights. It was, I held everything in, and so when those moments would happen, that was my depression from that, peaking out, because I wanted the same. But we did do so much of the same. We changed a lot of things to make it even better. You know how once you live somewhere for even 5 minutes, you're like, why did we do this instead of this? We should have done a pocket door, not a French door, vice versa. So we went through and just made some little changes like that that we felt like we would benefit from. And we loved the house. Moving in was so bittersweet and so surreal. It's weird. Now we're used to it. We've been here since September. So what are we on? I don't know, 7, 8 months now. But at first it was very bizarre. You know, a trash can used to be here and now it's here. The doorway moved a little, and you walk through and you just get those strange deja vu moments where it's the same, but it's not. But it's been great to be back home. We hope to never have to go through anything like that ever again. It's something we definitely learned from. And I went through situational depression for sure during those first few weeks. I didn't want to get out of bed. James asked me if I should maybe go talk to a therapist. I cried all the time. Every time I would think of something else and remember something else I lost, I would cry. You know, I realized my wedding gown, James's wedding ring, my wedding video, all of my books, my wedding book, the baby books, my high school yearbook, all of my mementos from my own childhood and college, the kids' first hair clippings, and, you know, just every little thing that you can think of. My mom, that Christmas before, so what, 4 months before, brought each of us a bag of our own childhood ornaments and said, now that you're an adult, you should get these. I lost them. I thought immediately, oh my gosh, I wish she had kept those. Just so many little things that every single time I would see, I remember seeing somebody outside drinking wine out of a glass of wine. And I remember thinking, I don't have glasses. I don't have wine glasses. So just a lot of little things like that, that would make you get emotional and make you get upset. It felt not fair. I remember thinking, this isn't fair. My kids just had to live in a rental home while we were waiting for the house to be built. And now they're going to be put out again. And I remember having guilt, thinking, as I grew up, I had one house all the way until I was 15, and then one house until I finished college. And I was like thinking they're going to have to now live in multiple houses. Just every little thing you can analyze, you analyze in a moment of trauma or grief. Of course, hindsight 2020, looking back, I wish I could tell myself that it's going to be okay, that the kids were going to be fine, that they were going to recover really fast, because kids are so stinking resilient. I wish I could tell myself that it's all stuff, and as much as I did have such sentimental value and I did care about all of those things, it's okay, and that I eventually wouldn't hurt as bad. But in the end, you can only work with what you know at the time, and that's what I knew. So that's the story of the fire. I could honestly go on and on about the fire in and of itself, the rebuilding process. Heck, maybe we'll do an episode about building one day for anyone that's interested by that. But I'm going to stop now from the negatives, from the fire. And I want to start the next episode in a minute talking about the way the PDA community rallied behind me, the way our friends and neighbors rallied behind me, and just what I found out about friendships and love from a really bad situation.